Hey everybody, Todd Vandermeid back for another edition of Freedom Steel. So we've got some not quite so breaking news, but yesterday, 24 hours ago, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals released their opinion in the consolidated challenges to Illinois' gun ban known as the Barnett case. More after the intro. Okay, everybody, Todd Vandermeid back again for another edition of Freedom Steel. Former NRA contract lobbyist, Illinois gun law guru, the gun Santa. So here we go. The decision is out. It is 2-1 against us in the gun owning community. We had Brennan, the chief judge, write a dissenting opinion again. You have Easterbrook on the wrong side of the Constitution once again. And for once in final determination, Judge St. Eve, appointed by President Trump, is now firmly ensconced herself into the liberal side of the anti-gun movement. The easiest way I can describe this decision, it is the most dishonest legal jujitsu that they can wrangle through whatever loophole is left within Heller. And that's what they try to do here. It's no more, no less. So I'm going to cut down some bullet points, then we'll get into a few things. So they're still saying that Friedman is good law. Bullpucky. They hang their hat on Friedman in a couple of ways and keep trying to breathe new life into that old corpse of a ruling, despite Bruin, despite Wolford, despite Hamani and like. They continue to hide their interest balancing behind other things. Now they have glommed onto the greatest, there are these advancements in technological developments that put these firearms outside the scope of the Second Amendment. Nobody is going in asking for a phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range. But they think that's it. As a throwback, and we got Rahimi'd all over this brief. They cite Rahimi a number of times. Funny thing is, while they cite Wolford over a dozen times, what they don't do is they don't cite the clarification of the test from Bruin that Justice Alito put in there. Wonder why that is. Why? Because they'd lose. That's why. That's part of the dishonesty that is in this, to the point that it almost it's either judicial malfeasance or corruption. And I don't know which one it is. They continue to pound around the idea that these firearms were not around in 1791. And they sit there and they basically say, we're going to do what we're going to do until the Supreme Court explicitly and unequivocally says we can't. That's what they are. So they also say that registration is a shall issue scheme, so therefore it fits comfortably under Bruin's footnote 9. Yeah, that's all 100% bullpucky. I mean, never mind that Barnett et al. Is the first case to have a full-blown trial the way we did. And they continuously to disguise their rulings, saying, oh, we're not interest balancing, we're not doing this, we're following Bruin faithfully. Yeah, bull. They sat there and start off, though it's clear and undisputed that we review the underlying question of constitutional law de novo, it is less clear and disputed how much deference, if any, we owe the district court's finding of fact. And they go on, but that development, the district court's factual findings went almost exclusively to step one. By contrast, the historical laws in the record and the parties' arguments about them remain essentially the same. They stood at the preliminary injunction stage. Indeed, notably, intervening developments favor the defendants. What? What? Harmony breaks to us. Wolford breaks to us. And this is just the legal judicial dishonesty that exists within Judge St. Eve, Judge Easterbrook. It's funny that St. Eve is the author of the opinion, and I'm betting that Easterbrook, in his own crafty little way, didn't want his name on it, so when it's overturned, that it's not his name on the opinion that was overturned. But we'll all remember where he was. There's no secret about that. One of the things is they focus on Bowie knives. Crazy thing that they constantly cite Rahimi throughout this, but there's only one cite to Hamani. And the big deal about Hamani was that Hamani kind of narrowed how you do these analogs to modern day laws compared to what was around in 1791 or possibly 1865, 1868. But here we focus here instead on the leading example of this tradition, regulations of the Bowie knife, or as one Reconstruction era court called it, the instrument of almost certain death. They largely focus on that. They've got nothing from 1791. They have to bootstrap Bowie knife laws. Now, the one thing about Hamani sat there and said, you got to be within the same zip code, paraphrasing it, but they said that the drunkard laws weren't good enough. And here in this opinion, they try to analogize that, oh, look, over in Rahimi, they said surety laws were close. Well, there were a bunch of surety laws at the time of the founding. They sat there, and if there was an issue, you had to go see the magistrate. You had to go to him and possibly post a bond or a surety that you were going to behave. That's a lot more closer to having to go in front of a judge to get a hearing on whether or not you're going to be convicted of a domestic violence charge, as opposed to Bowie knives are akin to modern semi-automatic rifles. And since there were 3 or 4 ordinances, territorial laws, whatever you want to call them, about Bowie knives, that's good enough to sit there and allow for the banning of entire classes of rifles, shotguns, and handguns across a wide swath. They jumped back into one of my favorite parts about Heller was they sat there and said that, look, it's no interest, say as others do, that, we can ban handguns because rifles and shotguns are left. Well, here they take the same kind of approach and said, hey, even with these guns banned, there are a host of other firearms that you can still have. You can't have it both ways. These guys are dumping on Heller in any way, shape they can. It is just, it's legal malpractice. I mean, if there was a way to impeach these guys for being this stupid, I think it would be possible. But our hopes are now pinned on Viramontes. So what's going to happen? I would wager to say that the parties here are going to file for a cert petition quickly. One of the things I know is that FPC and SAF are controlling in both Viramontes and Grant out of Connecticut. So you've got a Cook County ordinance and you have a state law out of Connecticut being challenged within, in the granting from that Supreme Court. And part of it is that they may have done it because when the first New York case went up about transporting guns, the same state, New York State and New York City got together and altered the law and mooted the case out. Here, I think Cook County is going to die on this hill, and I don't think Connecticut is going to do anything to modify their law to try to moot out this case. And on Barnett, remember the lead attorneys were Clement and Murphy. They're not in the Viramontes show. They're not there. So I would wager to say that we're going to see a cert petition from the Barnett group relatively quickly to get something up there. Now, as I was telling you, that remember in Friedman, well, in Heller, they sat there and made the comment about frivolous. Some have made the argument bordering on the frivolous that only those arms in existence in the 18th century are protected by the Second Amendment. We do not interpret constitutional rights that way. Just the First Amendment protects modern forms of communications, and the Fourth Amendment applies to modern forms of search. The Second Amendment extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. Now, Barnett, the court goes on to quote Wolford in a number of instances. But you know what they don't quote? They don't quote a passage where Justice Alito laid out three underlying principles in step one of Bruin. First, does the law apply to the people, which is to say to all members of the political community? Answer, yes. Second, does it concern any form of arms, i.e., any weapon customarily used for offense or defensive purposes? Unequivocally, yes. Third, does the law place any restrictions on either keeping, i.e., possession, or bearing, i.e., carrying of arms? Again, yes. And so what happens here is they ignore all that. And what do? They jump to a whole bunch of other BS in how they come down this, because they've got all kinds of stuff in this opinion about ARs are more akin to machine guns, and they double down on this whole notion that they're not used in self-defense. The test has never been, are they used in self-defense? The test is, are they kept for lawful purposes, such as self-defense? But oh no, they're just way too quick to jump back on this bandwagon. And so I'm just going to quote them because I'm so frustrated by this. From 1791 through the mid-19th century, the ubiquitous firearm was a single-shot, muzzle-loading firearm. In other words, these guns could not fire consecutive rounds. Someone seeking to fire 2 shots would have needed to reload the gun in between rounds by meticulously loading the projectile and a propellant into the muzzle, a process that could take half a minute. As such, they did not have the capacity to occasion a societal concern with mass shootings. Their advanced military-like features enable them to inflict catastrophic injuries that bear no similarity to those injuries caused by the comparatively primitive firearms that are widely available in the founding and Reconstruction eras. So there you get a twofer. In those 2 paragraphs from Barnett, they sit there and they double down on frivolous. And then they bootstrap in their interest balancing under some unprecedented societal concern or technological advancement. That's where they're going. And that's what this is. I'm going to have to cut this up into several pieces. Otherwise, this is going to be an hour-long video. That's not the intent here. And I'll have some more to say about a few other things. But hey, as always, if you like, subscribe, copy, paste, spread this around on social media. The authors of this opinion should lose their ability to practice law for how bad and how upside down it is to what? They didn't just continue down frivolous. They flipped the Supreme Court the big middle finger. And I think this was them getting their last licks in, probably knowing that they're going to lose in Viramontes, and they just wanted to get their last little piece in, which is going to be why amici briefs are so important in Viramontes. Probably the next subject of my next video. So, as always, guys, thanks again, and frag out.